Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you if you're on the West Coast. My name is Gabrielle Claiborne, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am honored to be today's moderator as we discuss the power of authenticity. But before we hear from myself and our esteemed panelists, I want to go over a few housekeeping items with you. In order to chat with other attendees and participants, we want to invite you to click on the Session tab on the right-hand side of your screen and then click Comments. To join the Q&A segment that we'll have at the end of our time together today, just click on the Q&A tab to ask the panelists a question. And if you'd like to enable the closed caption feature, you can do so by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the viewing window. So now that we've had the housekeeping items out of the way, let's jump right into today's conversation. You know, for much of my life, I grappled with what authenticity looked like for me, let alone experiencing the power of living an authentic life. But today, after 12 years of navigating a gender transition, my perspective of authenticity has changed. I now know from the perspective of my own personal lived experience, not only what is required of us to live an authentic life, but also the benefits that we and our world experience when we say yes to our yes. And oftentimes when someone hears my gender transition story, they tell me, Gabrielle, you're so courageous. I could never do what you did. But I haven't always been courageous, I respond by saying this, especially when it came to getting honest with what my heart was saying about the essence of who I am as a person. In fact, I spent half of my life wrestling with culture's expectations regarding my gender. The fear in my head kept me stuck in a place that was inauthentic with my heart. Have you ever felt inauthentic? Maybe you felt your heart inviting you in a new vocational direction, but your head worried about finances. Or have you ever felt like you weren't being your true self in a relationship? Feeling inauthentic is something that many of us have experienced in the past. Or perhaps there is something in your life right now. Maybe you're feeling from your heart inviting you to consider something that might result in pushback from your family and friends, or even your faith community. Well, that's where I found myself 17 years ago when the man that I'd been living as stumbled across a website showing pictures of transgender women. What I was seeing finally explained the internal gender dilemma that I'd been struggling with for decades. And when I saw these images, immediately my heart knew, that's me. But then my head said, don't be ridiculous, Gabrielle. You can never be that person. What would your church say? They're not going to let a trans woman continue serving as an elder and a Bible study leader. And think of your family. For heaven's sakes, your dad is a Pentecostal preacher. This will devastate your parents. And what about your wife and the kids? You could lose your entire family. Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life? And what about your career, your six-figure income? You could lose everything. Well, despite my head's relentless attempts to convince me of these risks, my heart was quietly and persistently inviting me to consider a different path, a path of integrity and authenticity. For the next 5 years, I mostly felt stuck, but I did take one very small step in response to my heart's invitation. I continued researching online and learning what I could from the little things here and there. Then one day I Googled dressing services, Atlanta, and to my amazement, a site popped up. Explore Your Feminine Side. This was a local dressing service here in Atlanta run by a woman by the name of Ramona who actually made a living helping biological males dress as women. I panicked. My online research had just gone from not too scary to absolutely terrifying. Now I had a choice to make. I could take this next frightening step and call Ramona, or I could stay stuck. Well, for the next couple of weeks, that's exactly what I did. I stayed stuck. But finally, I mustered the courage to call and make an appointment with her. Actually, showing up for that appointment was my next scary step. In fact, I was just a hot mess that day as I was driving to the appointment. But as soon as Ramona greeted me at the door and ushered me upstairs to her dressing salon, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. You see, her salon was rooms of dresses and shoes and wigs and jewelry and drawers of lingerie. So over the next couple of hours, Ramona worked her magic and dressed me head to toe in my true feminine gender expression. After Ramona got me all patted and dressed, she sat me down in her salon chair and started applying the makeup and a wig, things that I had never done for myself before. Now, all this time that she was doing my makeup and my hair, she was standing between me and the mirror, so I wasn't able to see the transformation that was taking place. When she was done, she looked at me and she says, "Gabrielle, are you ready?" With my heart beating wildly, I said, "I think so." It was at that moment Ramona stepped away from the mirror, and there, for the very first time, I saw myself on the outside as the person I knew I was on the inside. I was 49 years old and meeting myself for the very first time. It was at that moment I knew this is me. You know, I smile every time I think about that day because it was the first time that I felt whole as a person. And what I learned from this experience is that to experience the power of authenticity, we must acknowledge the fears in our heads, but act on the truth of our hearts. You know, the reality is the fears are never going to go away because they're there to serve a purpose. They're there to protect us, to make us feel comfortable. But at some point, we have to decide, do we want to live our lives comfortably or do we want to live our lives authentically? So I trust that after today's conversation, you will find the courage within yourself to take courageous steps in the direction of your most authentic self and experience the life of power and purposefulness like you've never dreamed. With that, I would like to invite our first speaker to the stage, Hiro Ortiz. Welcome, Hiro.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you also thank you for your introduction, and also thank you so much for sharing your beautiful, inspiring, powerful story. That was, oh my gosh, it was just so awesome. Well, anyway, good morning. For some of you, good afternoon. My name is Hiro Ortiz. My pronouns are she or he, or if you want to use they. I am identified as a non-binary person, so that's why you can use whatever pronouns you feel would suit me. I don't really have any request. So anyway, I was born in Japan and grew up in Japan. Now, probably many of you are aware, but the Japanese society values the conformity, meaning if you do something, or even if you behave, if you look even slightly different from your peers, that is like a no-no. That's just the culture. Right now I believe it is changing, but while I was growing up, that was that was a value that I had to live by. And because I was born and growing up in that environment, I did really not question. However, now when I look back, I believe I was a little rebellious, meaning I was looking for ways to be different because I was different. For example, um, when we went to school, a lot of schools in Japan require us to wear uniform. Now that is something I was not big fan of. The girls have to wear skirt, and the boys would wear pants. Now, because I was born female, I had to wear skirt, which I did not really like it. But to show a little bit of my side, sometimes now this was a little against the school rules, but I would have a non-matching socks. For example, one foot would have a red sock, and the other would have yellow sock. Now we are supposed to wear all white knee-high socks, and the rules were like that strict. But I'm like, you know what? I am different, and I was getting into trouble for that, but that was something just to show that I am not going to be the same as other people. Also, I was really into playing baseball, not the softball, but the baseball. Luckily, there was all girls baseball team in my town where I grew up, and my parents, actually my mom, signed me up for it, and I am just so grateful that she embraced me as the way I was and still the way I am. And thanks to that environment, thanks to my parents, I was able to thrive in that rather confining environment. Now, as I was getting older, I had to choose which universities to go to. And after the university, naturally, I would have to get a job. And I was familiar with the culture in the university and also the workplace. I decided that that was not my thing to go to school to further my education in Japan and also to get a job in Japan. So that was, I believe, that was the end of middle school years. Yeah, that's when I started thinking about my future. And again, my mom came to my rescue. She found a tiny, tiny ad in the newspaper about school in the United States that had an office in Tokyo, Japan, and that's actually where I grew up. And they were recruiting international students or Japanese students to attend university. So I jumped in the opportunity and registered, passed the test, went through some curriculum, and I ended up in school in West Virginia. Now, it is West Virginia is a very conservative state. However, the university was a little different. It was, I guess, recruiting students from all over the world. And now I believe that was a way for the school to make money because they could charge so much money for international students. So it was very diverse, and I loved it. Although I did experience the first time discrimination, not against my gender identity, but because I was racial minority person. So anyway, but that's how I ended up in the United States. And now being a member of racial minority group and also LGBTQ plus community, it helped me to be more aware and sensitive to some diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. And part of that, I believe, is because of my upbringing. I just was able to embrace the differences, and I had questions why I cannot be different, why this person is getting discriminated against uh, the other people. We in Japan, we have a lot of microaggressions. It's not obvious, but sometimes with the words, sometimes the attitude of others, you will know you are getting discriminated. So I have been always aware, but that's I just realized, oh my god, why am I so interested in this topic of, now it's a hot topic, diversity, equity and inclusion, but always I believe that was in my heart. And so now I am very interested in the topics, and I try to make some contribution to that topic by going to a summit like this, talking to other people, facilitating the conversations. And it's not just about LGBTQ plus challenges, but also racial discrimination, also cultural competence. That's something else that I'm very interested because of my background. So that was my brief introduction, and I am looking forward to having more conversation in this authenticity, power of authenticity, in the coming this coming hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hero, for showing up so courageously in your life and highlighting the impact that the different intersections in the cultures have on how we show up in our world. I know the first time that I met you and had lunch with you, I was so impressed with your story. I am so grateful that you've chosen to share so vulnerably with us today. Thank you for your visibility. The next panelist that I'd like to, or speaker I'd like to pull up to the stage is my friend, Dr. Anise Mabry. Dr. Anise Mabry was one of the very first individuals that actually gave me my wings of activism as I was beginning on my journey. She's a very dear friend of mine. I want to invite Dr. Mabry to the stage. Welcome, Dr. Mabry.
Hello. I am so excited to be here today because I didn't always have an opportunity to show up like this. I grew up in rural South Georgia, and for me, everything was either you went to church or you didn't. And I was the one that chose that I was not going to church. And in my family, it was a huge taboo. So I was a black sheep of the family way before I was the black sheep of the family. And what I learned, because I was always such an outcast, is I learned to find my own pathway early on in life. And for me, that meant when I was in school, I was always quirky, nerdy, geeky. I was always on my own beat. I didn't have a whole lot of friends. I had maybe 3 or 4 people that I was really close to, and still close to those ladies to this day. But, I just South Georgia is just very different. I just remember always dreaming of, "I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm gonna go to Atlanta." I didn't know what I was gonna do when I got to Atlanta, but I just knew I needed to get to Atlanta to be able to live whatever life I thought I wanted to live. And when I was 18 years old, I came out and I thought that, okay, I've graduated from high school, I'm going to come out and everything is just going to keep going as it is. I didn't realize that coming out was going to cause me to lose my whole family for 20 years. And the only family that I would have was the strangers that I was going to meet in Atlanta. I didn't realize that coming out was going to make me become homeless at 18 years old. Um, I didn't realize that coming out was going to force me to choose the pathways of, you know, when should I be in the closet? When should I be out of the closet? Um, there's just so much that I didn't realize, but there was a lot more that I did. I became a mom. I had two children, both who have special needs, and my children became my passion. They became my fire. They became my world. And because of my children, I became an activist in a whole different level. I was already an activist in the LGBTQ community, but my children made me become an activist for even more people, for youth aging out of foster care, for sex trafficking survivors, for homeless LGBTQ youth, for youth with individuals with disabilities, for children with autism. And, that's how I get to show up now. I get to show up in all of these areas, not only because of my experience of growing up in South Georgia and having children with disabilities, but also being able to be an educator and a law enforcement officer and all of those things that really just fold into who I am today. And sometimes I think back, if I could just go back and tell 18-year-old Denise to just stay the course and it's going to be okay. You know, you don't have to be afraid. It's gonna be okay. I just want to say that to her over and over. And I think that's why I continue to show up in the community to tell everyone else that it's going to be okay because 18-year-old Denise didn't have anyone to tell her that it was going to be okay. So I am so excited for this summit, for this platform, for this opportunity. And Gabrielle, you are one of my dearest champions. And I have a saying that, there's a lot of talk about who's at the table. And if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And what I love about Gabrielle is Gabrielle, no matter what table she's sitting at, she will always make room for me at the table. And that's a part of diversity and inclusion that I think sometimes that we miss. If you're at a table and you look around and you don't see other people at the table who look different from you, then you need to move over and make a seat for the people who are different because that means that some voices are missing from the table. And if the voices are missing from the table, that means they're going to be on the table. So thank you so much, Gabrielle, for this opportunity. I'm excited about this panel.
Thank you, Dr. Mabry. And I just have to say, oh my goodness, thank you for saying yes to your yes and doing what is yours to do, because not only are you showing up in spaces that are relevant to your own personal lived experience, but you're showing up in so many other spaces that now you're able to make sure that folks are not on the table, but at the table. So thank you so much. I really, I cherish our friendship, and I know that we have so much more to do together. So thank you for being here today and being a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Melania Armenta. She's a very good friend of mine, and we have actually started working together on some other board opportunities in the city of Atlanta area. She is a fierce advocate for so many things. The first time I met Melania years ago, I knew that this person was going to be a person that the world was going to have to reckon with. And as I suspected, that's exactly what's happening. I'm so proud of her courage and her visibility. Melania, welcome.
Hello, thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you for that amazing introduction. My name is Melania, and I am first generation Mexican American. My parents came from Mexico, and I actually I love the just the title of this summit or this particular panel, the power of authenticity. So I think authenticity has been such a key part of finding freedom within my lived experience. And so I came out as transgender 17 years ago to my friends and family, and then came out on the corporate side of like my career about let's see, 3 years ago now. And since then, it's just played such a pivotal role in just me navigating my role at work as a way to just contribute and being an asset to our industry within real estate. And so um, for me, my journey has been a little long with my friends and family, particularly with my family being a religious Catholic background, but have since it's evolved from being a relationship of fear based into actual now being very much supported by both my parents. In the beginning, my father actually would not talk to me for a few years because I don't think he understood how to navigate this new role as a father to someone that he basically didn't recognize. And over time, it took some very candid conversations between the both of us, but it has now evolved into this just very strong relationship between us two. And I think that it's really helped me um, kind of be more authentic in the way I show up. And that has now led me into being more involved in the advocacy role of being someone that identifies as being trans and also Latina in the Southeast. And Gabrielle has been such a beautiful mentor for me, and just showing up and being present and kind of guiding me in the right direction as far as just staying true to my messaging. And I consider myself an art advocate, and trans is just one component of my identity. I really do feel that being an art advocate plays into that power of authenticity. So that's my introduction. So again, I am a trans Latina that lives in the Southeast and am very public and open with my lived experience as a trans woman within the corporate world. So that's my introduction.
Thank you, Melania. I love that every time we get together, it's like you highlight the humanity of our different lived intersections. And I really appreciate that, because I think regardless of all the different intersections that we bring to the conversation, we're first human beings. And, a lot of times folks talk about the importance and the value of embracing differences. I really like to reframe differences as uniquenesses, because I think that allows us to come in to a space that may be different from our own lived experience and sit down across the table from one another and be comfortable getting uncomfortable in the spirit of learning to do and be better. So thank you for continuing elevating not only the humanity of our existence, Melania, but also the width, breadth, and depth of how we show up. So thank you. I'd like to bring all the speakers back to the stage, because I want to have a conversation around some other components as it relates to the power of authenticity. And I want to start with this question. And I'm sure that all the audience has heard different nuances of what authenticity looks like in our individual lives. But this word authenticity means different things to different people. And oftentimes its meaning is determined by our own personal lived experiences. So I would like to ask each of our panelists, what does authenticity look and mean to you? If y'all can help define me for that, with that. And Hero, why don't you start?
Sure. So for me, the word authenticity has two pillars. One is something visible, for example, physical appearance, gender, race, something like that. Things like that. Something that you can see. Now, sometimes it may not be obvious, but again, something visible. And the other pillar would be something that's not obvious. Um, under that pillar, I would say there are two areas. One is for me, my values, guiding principles. Am I being authentic to my behavior, the way I present myself? Is it aligned with my own values, my own guiding principles? So that's one. And the other thing is my awareness of things that I do not know. If I don't know something, I don't know. And that's also part of being authentic. I cannot pretend that, for example, things that transgender people face, like challenges, I cannot really relate to those because I have not been through that journey. Now, I don't want to say, oh, I can guess. I got you. I understand. That's a lie because that's, I don't know. But just being aware that I don't know, the awareness of things that I don't know, I think that is also just to be authentic, meaning that just to accept that there's something that I just don't know. So that's my I guess description of the word authenticity.
Yeah, and to your point, Hero, thank you for that. To your point, you just highlighted the complexity of authenticity, right? I mean, authenticity is just not one thing. It is not just in a certain form, right? There's many shades and hues and shapes of authenticity, what that can look like. So thank you for sharing your perspective.
Oh, you're
Dr. Mabry,
welcome.
how about you?
For me, authenticity means showing up in all of my areas as an African American lesbian, as a homeschool mom, as a law enforcement officer, as a community activist. And when I think of, if I don't show up authentically in any one area, then it hurts all of the other areas of me. It hurts the integrity. It hurts, because authenticity to me is also about integrity. Because everything that I do, my name is my brand. And that was one of the things that my ex-husband and I fought about in the courtroom, because he tried to strip my last name away from me. And I said, I Mabry is the brand that I have built my PhDs around. And, to take this away from me, you're taking away a part of my livelihood. And authenticity, it's about a livelihood too. And I think that sometimes I tell everyone, don't make choices today that's going to cost you income opportunities tomorrow. And authenticity goes to that too, because it's about trust. Can people trust you, and will people trust you?
Yeah, wow, the connection between authenticity and integrity, you cannot separate those two. Thank you for bringing that point up. And oh my goodness, Dr. Mabry, I feel like as I've watched your life unfold, I have watched that actually come to pass, right? And your point about if you're not all in, then there's an invitation. Okay, so what aspect of perhaps, you know, what your heart is calling you to do, are you resisting, or are you scared to, pursue, or whatever that looks like for you? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. I appreciate you bringing that juxtapose perspective up as well. Melania, how about you?
Authenticity. For me, it's freedom and free of fear. I think that it's agency in your own lived experience. To me, it's when you find someone that is truly authentic, they're typically someone that's intrinsically connected to their, I guess you would say, their soul, and they end up really showing up as a agent for the whole, right? Not just one little part of life, but their actions kind of resonate with the totality of everyone, not just like one particular unit of a society. Um, and so authenticity to me is just a form of freedom, and it's very palatable. It's very contagious at the same time. Um, to me, I think it's directly correlated to art, because typically when you meet an artist, they're very authentic, and they're very unique in their self-expression, um, and they're essentially, to me, art is a way that the soul articulates in the material world, something that's wanting to come out and play and show that there is a way to fully express without the social constructs of any false identities that is trying to be superimposed on that unique individual. So,
Yeah, you made the point that authenticity is soul level. It's like essence, right? So we all have an essence, right? As individuals, as women, and I think that what my message to the world is that have you tapped into your essence, right? Have you embraced your essence with without fear or trepidation, fiercely, and living out loud? Have you done that? And I appreciate you bringing that forward, and also the relationship to creativity, right? Because I a lot of times folks, when they struggle with the diversity of the human family, I tell them, well, it's funny that you share that with me, because we have in the Atlanta area, and I'm sure in different the places across the U.S. and even the world, we have aquariums where we celebrate and pay to go see the diversity of the the animal kingdom, right? We go to botanical gardens to see the diversity in the plant kingdom. But my goodness, we're struggling when we're trying to understand and accept and embrace the diversity of the human family. I mean, we are just as creative as all those other aspects of creation, right? So lean into that, with fierceness and courage is what I say. I think as an LGBTQ plus woman, my experience has been that because our lived experiences may be perceived as different from that of our straight cisgender sisters, our journeys of authenticity may seem unrelatable to theirs. So I'd like to ask each of you, what are your thoughts on this? And what would you say to a person who is trying to connect the dots on how we are all connected as women, regardless of the various intersections that we possess and the individual paths that we take? Hero, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, I would like to share a brief example that has happened to me really recently. Probably that was 2 weeks ago. As I was walking into the women's restroom, the woman behind me says, "This is the women's restroom," and I looked her up and said, "Yes," and I just did my business. But anyway, when I shared that story with my cisgender friends, they don't, it's hard for them to understand why is that such a big deal, or why did it happen to you. It's even my girlfriend, she's a cis female, and she's like, well, what's wrong with that? Or they just cannot relate to my experience. And I do have a little fear of, actually, I'll be honest with you, I do have a little fear when I go to use the public restroom. Sometimes I would get blocked. Sometimes, people would come in and look at me washing my hand. They would go out the door to make sure they are in the right bathroom. So I do have the fear, and that's something that probably Gabrielle and Melania, you might be able to relate to that story. But a lot of times the cisgender people cannot relate to it. So I just wanted to share that experience. Being that said, if they are curious about, or if they are trying to connect the dots, what I would say to them is, let's focus on something in common. Could be, common experience, and then we're going to start from there, because what I want them to know is we are not that different from cis female. We do have, I mean, everybody is different to begin with, so that's something in common. Everybody's different, but also we do have some common experiences. And as I shared with you my thought on me having trouble relating to transgender people's challenges, there's there may be some common experiences that you all may have had, and as a non-binary person I may have had, or cis female and myself, I had a baby. If they had a baby, that's a common experience. So I would say, you know what, let's focus on some common experience, some common things. So that's what I would say.
I love that you bring this commonality to the table, Hero, because that is one thing that I often lean into, you know, because we are LGBTQ plus women from a cis straight woman's perspective. They're going to look at our experiences as, different, right? But yeah, if you would sit down across the table from us, and a lot of cis women, straight women are doing this. They're realizing that the width, breadth, and depth of the sisterhood is much broader than perhaps what we once thought it was, right? But when you sit down across the table from us, you get to know us, that we have more in common than not. So thank you for raising that point. Dr. Mabry, how about you?
As we've been having this conversation today, I thought for a moment, and I have a privilege. I have a privilege of passing, because unless I open my mouth or unless you Google me, you would think that I am a straight woman. And I have always dated masculine centered women, and the bathroom thing has always been an issue. I'm always having to fight for the person that I'm with to just go pee. I'm like, can we just pee in peace? Just let people pee. And, you know, it just, it strikes different now, especially when you look at all of the legislation that's coming down. And it's like I say to people all the time, when I was a straight woman, which I never really was, but I just passed as one, kind of like that commercial. I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. I was never a straight woman. I just played one in life for 8 years. But I think that a lot of times cisgender straight women forget. They get caught up in their own fight, and they forget at the end of the day, it's all of us or none of us, and what happens to one of us impacts all of us. And it's kind of like that song on TikTok right now, if we go down together. And that's where we have to stand. I mean, we've got to stand as, if one of us goes down, we all go down. And it's not, and it's about leaning in to that perspective, but also challenging cis women to think about, you know, what happens to me is ultimately going to happen to you or your children.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mabry. There's been a lot of pushback from certain women groups, especially against trans women, right? And even LGBT, let's say, let me do this, LBTQ women, uh, because some cis straight women feel like our lived experiences are taking something away from them. But in fact, we're not. We are not taking anything away from you. We're just wanting the world and you to embrace our individual journeys in our journey of womanhood, right? So it's not that we're trying to take a spot away from the table from you or take anything away from your journey as a cis straight woman. We're just wanting to expand the understanding and the complexity of what the sisterhood looks like. And if you're wanting to understand more about how we look at humanity now from the perspective of identity, I really want to invite our audience to Google the genderbread person, because the genderbread person shows 4 different aspects that we have as human beings. And a lot of times the stumbling block is we are trying to be defined by our biological sex as opposed to our identity. And our identity and biological sex are completely different continuums. There's 4 aspects of gender that you'll see in the genderbread person. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that now, but really want to encourage you, if you'd like to learn more about the complexity of gender, Google that. Melania, how about you?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to add too much of anything that is going to be different than what you 3 have already contributed, but I really do love exploring the fact that there's an infinite amount of seats at the table when it comes to a sisterhood. And I think that the more we remind each other of that, and also ourselves, like I remember how much I wanted to just be accepted as a female, as a cisgendered female. And as I've kind of evolved my own spirituality and the way I've kind of self-reflect, I used to look at my situation as a disorder or as something that was second citizen almost. It wasn't like first class within society. And as I've matured, I realized that it's not gender dysphoria, but genderphoria. And I think that the more we start to kind of share that perspective with, our cisgendered sisters, I think that they also start to recontextualize it, and it doesn't take anything away from them. It just adds to their own beauty, and knowing that there are other forms of reflection in this other individual. And I think the more we see ourselves in others, then I think that it starts to kind of put down the scarcity mindset perspective and actually want to welcome more. Sometimes the most lived out loud Thanksgivings are when you have a just table full of people and everyone's just laughing at the most ridiculous jokes and stuff. And I think that sisterhood should be seen as that, where the more we invite others, like the more fun the jokes are going to be, and the more we can actually laugh and take life a little more sincere instead of serious. Because life isn't that serious. It's a big old comedy, and we're all supposed to laugh about it. And I think that the more we lean into our authenticity, lean into sincerity instead of seriousness, and let go of the societal avatars that no longer serve the sisterhood, so that we can all get to work in a more regenerative way, in a more efficient way. So yeah, to me, it's just, learning to continue to go within and be that reflection of difference and inclusivity. And it's contagious. To me, it's just authenticity is contagious. And I think the more we have these types of conversations, I think it's going to just pollinate and, put down those barriers, and, it be like welcome mats, be like, oh my God, I don't know you, but like, let's get to know each other. So.
Yeah. And Melania, there is an interesting thing that you bring up about this whole scarcity thing, because we were on the phone, you and I were on the phone just the other day, and you were actually shopping with your cis
Yes.
woman friend, right? And so
Mhm.
y'all have developed this beautiful bond. And this is exactly what can happen when we get curious and lean into those moments of getting to know one another. Like all the points that we've shared in this particular question. I love, bringing up the scarcity concept, because I think that is one thing that our culture really struggles with. Is this lack mentality, that if if someone else is elevated, or we choose to step back from the table and let someone else have the seat at the table, like you were talking a little earlier, Dr. Mabry, then we're going to lose something, or we're going to not have access any longer. But that is not the case. We actually have more access the more that we elevate each other. And it actually benefits our own causes when we do that. So thank you all for highlighting that. We talked a little bit about inauthenticity just a little bit ago, but I want to dig a little deeper on that question here. I know in my own journey of authenticity, I spent years living my life inauthentically for fear of losing everything. What I didn't know then that I now know is that with every inauthentic step I took, I unknowingly distanced myself from my friends and my loved ones. And it wasn't until I came out and owned my truth that I realized that I had, in fact, damaged the trust and respect that I thought I had with these people by remaining silent and not being honest with myself and those around me. So I'd like to ask each of you, and if you can kind of keep your answers as brief as you can, because we have one more thing and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. What has been your experience with coming to terms with that season that you knew who you were or what your heart was calling you to do, but you delayed in responding due to the ramifications that your decision may have had on your own life or the lives of those around you, especially those your loved ones? So, Hero, how about you?
Well, I
I
think
know
I
that was a
am.
mouthful. Hopefully, you got all
Well, my answer will be short. I feel like I am one of those spoiled brats that I'm not trying to be like, oh, I figured it all out. But because, as I mentioned briefly, well, maybe lengthily in my introduction, thanks to my parents and the environment that supported me to be who I am, who I have been, I really did not have that challenge.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Hero. Dr. Mabry, how about you?
I think for me, when I came out at 18 and I lost everything and everyone, and then it would take me almost 20 years to get that back. And the only way that I got it back was to agree to be married and live a lie. I realized that what it was costing me was not worth it. And so when I came out for the second time, I never went back. I broke the doors off the hinges and
Woo-hoo.
I didn't care what I lost, because here's the beautiful thing about losing something one time. Once you lose it one time, you don't care. You don't care anymore, because it's like, I lost it one time, I'll figure it out and I'll find my way back.
Yeah, and even if you lose it, it doesn't mean that you've lost it forever necessarily. Perhaps it could mean that, perhaps it could not, right? So, yeah, great point. Melania, how about you?
Can you re-ask the question just so I can make sure that I'm answering it appropriately?
So, essentially, what I'm asking you to respond to is, if you've had a season in your life when you've lived off inauthentically,
Mhm.
how did you navigate that, and how did you come to terms with saying yes to your yes at the point that you did?
I will say that for me, it was a relationship that I was in where my authenticity was suppressed. We were in a committed relationship, but the trans part of my existence was always swept under the rug. It was never acknowledged with his family, and it was acknowledged around our friends. But there was a form of shame, and I think that shame was then inherited by myself, and I didn't know where this scarcity mindset of fear was starting to kind of affect me. And I realized that this was no longer serving my higher self. This relationship was creating a soul debt for myself, and so I think that deciding to take a stand for myself was a moment where I decided that I am an abundant being, that I should not be full of shame. And while he was not imposing that shame on me, um, I absorbed it just by just close proximity. And I think that the moment I decided to just take a stand for my own like authentic self, and realizing that my next partner would have to be of the abundance mindset and not feel like they are in fear of who or what people may think or say about our dynamic and our bond. Um, so yeah, I think it was, oh gosh, it was recently. It was 2017 when I decided that I was going to move away and kind of take a stand for myself again. And it wasn't like a coming out of trans. It was just like realizing, this isn't serving me, and this is not healthy for me personally. And I think that it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. To just stand in my own authentic self and saying, like, I will never live in the shadows of someone else's fear.
Yeah, and what I took away from that, Melania, is that this journey of authenticity is not necessarily a destination. It is just that, a journey, and it's not necessarily a straight line. There's a lot of, bobs and weaves that we have to navigate through. And the beautiful thing about it is that relationship that ended up being not necessarily the most life-giving relationship, ended up being the inspiration and the impetus behind you owning yourself on a whole new level, right? And that is really encouraging to me, and I hope to many other folks listening in, because I think a lot of times, we have these invitations that come to us, and we don't recognize them as invitations, or we recognize them as invitations. We say, whoa, I don't know if I'm wanting to go there because of, the perceived risk or everything that I might lose in my life, right? So, which is a perfect segue to our last question that I wanted to ask each of you. We are all on our own journey of authenticity, whatever that looks like for us, right? So I want to ask each of you, for those of us in the audience, what would you say to someone who is standing at the precipice of that first courageous step, or another courageous step in the journey of their authenticity? What would you say to them to encourage them to continue on that journey? Hero, how about you?
What I would say to them would be, when we say yes to one thing, most of the time we say no to the other thing. So it may take some time to take that difficult path, but just to know, or just to remind, for example, myself, what will be the priority? What would make me happier? Should I say yes to this one? Because that means I would be saying no to the other thing. So, sometimes we have to choose, and sometimes it's not just or, but sometimes it can be and, but a lot of times it's either this or that. So just to know that, what do you want to say yes to, and what do you want to say no to? I think that may help them to navigate. Well, at least to me, that has helped me to navigate this journey.
Yeah, and so own that yes and own that no equally, right? Thank you. Great advice. Dr. Mabry, how about you?
I think for me, I would say, when you say no to someone else, are you prepared to say yes to yourself? Are you willing to lose yourself to have someone else? Even if having yourself is going to cost you everything, you've got the most important person in the world, and that's you. Because you will never leave you, you will never fail you, and you will never let you down.
I love it. Self-love. One of the first and most important steps that we can take as human beings. Thank you for that, Dr. Mabry. Melania, how about you?
I think that we have to remind ourselves that nature loves courage, and that every great hero's journey has been rewarded with the prize of that being that agent for the whole. And I think that the more we remind ourselves to slow down, take a deep breath, and literally just trusting the process and knowing that that somehow or another that you're going to make it. Because if you're leading with that authentic strive to want to grow and evolve, nature is right there to catch you with that feather bed, knowing that it feels like an abyss, but there's going to be that feather bed there that just catches you. So I think that just knowing that courage is always rewarded, and it takes a courageous person to step out and be authentic.
Courage is not only rewarded, but it's also inspiring to those around us. Thank you,
Yes.
Melania, for that. And thank you for likening our journeys to nature because, hey, guess what happens today? Nature is just showing up. Tomorrow, nature shows up. Next year, nature is going to continue showing up. So thank you for that wisdom, Melania. So we've come to the end of the time of our conversation. Now we want to kind of open it up for our audience to ask any questions that you may have with anything that our panelists have shared, or perhaps something that hasn't been discussed as it relates to our topic. So what kind of questions do we have from our audience? Okay, so we've got a question here. Can you suggest, and this is for any of our panelists, can you suggest any resources for people who are trying to have a better understanding of gender identity terminology to make sure that they are approaching language from the most respectful, from the most supportive and inclusive perspective? Any recommendations there?
I'm fairly new to the whole like advocacy, but I think like just literally Googling books. I wish I had a list of books where, but I think that there's an amazing amount of literature that can help us kind of navigate. I think I've been meaning to read uh, um, Laverne Cox's new book, but I think that just reading the stories behind the lived experience of a trans person or gender fluid person, I think is a really great way to kind of get a empathetic insight on how to navigate um, that. I think did I answer that question, or am I reading another question?
No, that's
Yeah,
good.
okay.
Thank you, Melania.
Yeah.
Hero, Dr. Mabry.
I have two resources. One is you, Gabrielle. You you are very very knowledgeable on this one, so you'll be the one resource that I would go to. But also, I work with a local PFLAG chapter, and the PFLAG's website has some resources that might help to answer this question.
Thank you, Hero. Yeah, and thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. Dr. Mabry, any
And
suggestions?
definitely, I want to echo Gabrielle's work and her book. And also, when I work with children at our homeschool cooperative, we always read the book Same but Different. And it's a children's book, but it's still a great book. And sometimes with
Absolutely.
adults, you got to just start where the kids are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that recommendation. And Amy and Nancy, thank you for entering these resources in the chat box. I'll also recommend, thank God for the internet. Google, Google is our best friend. Anytime we want to learn something new, there are many resources out there on the web that are very good, solid information that you can really lean into and educate yourself. So, really want to encourage you all to do that. Any other question? We've got another question here. How can a cisgender white woman be better advocate for people in the LGBTQ plus community on a day-to-day basis? And I'm sorry that we've lost Melania here, but Hero, Dr. Mabry, do y'all want to respond to that?
I'll start with that one because I get this question a lot. And I think, the biggest ways that cisgender white women can show up for LGBTQ people and LGBTQ people of color is give us an opportunity to have space, and when we do have that space and you're showing up, if you see something that's wrong, don't just be silent, because your silence means our death. Your silence is compliance, and you can't stay silent because we need you. We need you to amplify our voices because sometimes it's not safe for us to do that.
And oftentimes, great point, Dr. Mabry, oftentimes folks are silent because they're afraid that they're going to say something wrong or offensive. And again, I go back to something that I said earlier, that I really want to encourage and invite us to get comfortable being uncomfortable in the spirit of learning to do better. Approach it if you're unsure, approach it in a respectful way. And we, as LGBTQ plus individuals and community members, we know when someone is approaching us within the spirit of wanting to learn and to do better, as to when someone is doing it deliberately to be offensive and disrespectful. So, like Dr. Mabry said, silence, ambiguity is even more dangerous than not taking a side these days. So, we really want to encourage you for that. I think the other thing that I would recommend is, I love the point that you made, Dr. Mabry, about highlighting voices. And that's one reason that we're having the conversations that we're having here on this panel and other panels with Passionistas Summit, is making sure that you're highlighting the voices so folks can connect with individuals' personal story, because that creates, that connects us at a heart level. And when we're connected at a heart level, the head knowledge will follow, but the heart level, that heart connection, allows us to connect in a way that I want to lean in. It invites me to lean in more to these types of conversations. So definitely want to make sure that we're elevating other voices in the process. Do we have any other questions out there? Okay, here's a question. What advice do you have for someone who feels stuck and wants to take their first step in living their authentic life? Hero, Dr. Mabry, what would you have to say to that?
Kara, do you want to go first, or you want me
Go
to?
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. You can go ahead.
I was just going to say, just, that first step is the scariest step. And there's a quote that says, you don't have to see every step on a staircase to know that the steps are there. Just take the first step. Just take the first step.
Dr. Mabry, that is so beautifully put, because that's exactly what I said in my TED Talk a couple of years ago. You don't have to know your exact destination before you can take the first step. In fact, guess what? You will not know your exact destination. But what happens is, with each step you take, no matter how small, you amplify your heart's soft, quiet whispers, and you help those whispers grow into a strong, confident voice, a voice that can stand up to the fears in your head and keep you moving forward courageously. So yes, yes, yes. Take a step, even though you may not have the map or the final destination. Hero, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that was wonderfully put. I don't think I have anything really else to add to it. So thank you for Dr. Mabry and Gabrielle. That was beautiful.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, first of all, for showing up the way that you've showed up today. Your courage, your transparency, your vulnerability. Your visibility is truly making a difference for those who are looking to take those steps in the direction of their most authentic self and say yes to a life of joyous peace, life-giving power, and world-changing purpose. And with that, I'd like to remind everyone to check the summit schedule for more great events just like this one, and to check the chat for ways to follow the participants and Passionistas project on social media. And I know that Amy and Nancy have put a lot of contact information in the chat. Thank you for elevating that information, you two. And in closing, I'll leave you with this quote from one of my favorite authors and speaker, and that is Brene Brown. Brene says, authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. So let's all be courageous enough to let the world see our true selves. Thank you for joining us today, everyone.